Today we are going to visit Edinburgh Castle. As at today, the 17th of May, due to ongoing COVID restrictions, there are measures in place to limit the numbers of visitors allowed to enter the castle at any one time. Now, bookings must be made in advance, online, and at the time of booking you choose. So the time slot that you wish to enter the castle must be entered. For further information about the booking procedures, we'll cover a little bit about this at the end of the video. Now, what we aim to do during this virtual tour of the castle is to give you an idea of what you're able to visit and the social distancing measures that have been put in place to protect everyone that visits. Please be aware that if you're planning to visit the castle and you've booked the services of a private tour guide, unfortunately, Historic Scotland, who look after this castle and many other historic buildings and monuments, will not allow your guide to accompany you during your tour of the castle. Now, I believe that this may change at a later date, but for the foreseeable future this will be standard policy. Now, as this is my first visit since the castle reopened on the 30th of April, I don't quite know what to expect when I go inside, so together, today, we're going to learn a little bit more about what you can and you can't do when you get it. Presently, I'm standing on the castle esplanade. This is effectively a large parade ground that sits in front of the entrance to the castle, so I'm standing on the eastern side of the castle, and if I turn around 180 degrees, I'm facing towards the top end of the Royal Mile. However, looking back towards the castle, I'm now facing the entrance. Out of all the sides of the castle, this side was perhaps the most vulnerable. That is why at the front of the entrance there is a ditch, and over that there would have been a drawbridge. Now there is just a bridge, and that would have been fairly commonplace for castles at the time. However, this facade that you see here was actually built in 1887, long after the original castle was built. It was really an attempt to make the castle look a bit more attractive, because by the time of the 19th century the castle had become a tourist attraction. Then, in 1929, statues were commissioned for either side of the entrance, which you can see. On the left you have Robert the Bruce, and on the right William Wallace, considered to be two of Scotland's most iconic freedom fighters. Above the main entrance can be seen the Half Moon Battery. This was built after the Lang Siege of 1571, which ended in 1573, when Queen Mary, or Mary Queen of Scots supporters, were fighting against the Presbyterian Protestant army. Because the eastern side of the castle was the only side that could be attacked, the Half Moon Battery was designed to support heavy artillery. However, within the walls of the Half Moon Battery are the remains of a tower house built for David II in 1368. So once you walk through the outer gatehouse, this will take you on the main route up towards Portcullis Gate, which used to be the main entrance into the original medieval castle. The tower that you can see above is called the Argyll Tower, and it's named after the 9th Earl of Argyll, who was held here prior to his execution in 1685. The tower that you see now is actually part of a restoration that took place in 1887. The Portcullis Gate didn't just consist of one gate, but was in fact 5 gates. It really was the first line of defence. Once you come through the gate, on the right hand side you will see the area where you can pick up your pre-recorded packs or your audio guides. Once you've got that, you can actually walk around the castle, punch in the number for each designated area and listen to the commentary for that area. Off to the left here, you have the very appropriately named Lang Stairs. And they're the shortcut to the top of the castle, and in fact it's probably worth pointing out that there are 3 levels to the castle. The lower ward, where I'm standing presently, then the middle ward, and then the very top upper part, the upper ward. Anyway, we're not going to take the stairs. Instead, we're going to make our way round by the more leisurely route that curves around the side of the wall. Off to the right here we have the Argyle Battery, and this is with a platform that was built in around the 1730s, and it was designed to defend the northern flank of the castle. To be honest though, you would have to question why they would really need any guns here, as this side of the castle is almost impossible to attack because of the sheer rock face that is below. It's important to remember that the castle is actually built on the plug of an extinct volcano, and that three sides of the castle are sheer rock face. The castle can only be approached on foot from the direction I have walked. Opposite the battery, you have a timeline briefly describing the major events that took place on the castle rock. The circles that you see on the ground here are so that when there are more people actually in the castle, they can stand here without getting too close to one another. So this is their efforts to make sure that people are socially distanced. Further along from the Argyle Battery, we arrive at this location. These are the cart sheds. It served many purposes over the years, including a storage area for the carts that would collect supplies from the town and further afield. It's also been a barracks, an ammunition store, and many other things, but now it's a cafe. Of more interest right here is the 1 o'clock gun. The idea of a 1 o'clock gun came into existence in 1861, but it wasn't actually the first time signal in Edinburgh. Much earlier in 1853, a visual time signal on Calton Hill was created. And Calton Hill in the distance, there is a tall column at the very top. That is called the Nelson Monument, and at the top of the Nelson Monument you will find a large wooden cannonball. And at precisely 5 minutes to 1, the cannonball starts to be raised. Then at exactly 1 o'clock, the cannonball drops. You can see the Nelson Monument just in the middle of the picture there. Now, if you're wondering why a visual signal was initially adopted, well, it was to do with the ships and the mariners that were docked down in the port of Leith. When they had to calibrate their equipment, such as chronometers, they had to remove them from the ship, then bring them up to Calton Hill, where the Royal Observatory was. So it was decided to create a time signal using a cannonball which would drop from the top of the Nelson Monument, and they could simply stay in port, use their telescope, look up and wait for the cannonball to drop. And then latterly the 1 o'clock gun was brought into being, and that gave two time signals, one audible and one visual. Now if we carry on walking down beyond the cafe and through this entrance just up ahead, it will take us to what's commonly known as Hospital Square. The name is the giveaway. This was where the hospital was located. Now it was built in about 1898 and it remained in use up until about 1947. As with many parts of the castle, it's been used for many other purposes over the centuries. It really was an evolving castle. Within the square you will find the War Museum, which clearly describes Scotland's contribution to first of all its own Scottish Standing Army, and then in the early 1800s the British Army. In the square there is also a fine statue of Field Marshal Earl Haig. Now for those who may not be familiar, he was the commander of the British forces during the First World War. And depending on your perspective, some say that he was a great commander, but others say not, due to the huge numbers of men that were sent to their deaths in the devastating trench warfare on the Western Front. At the end of the war, because of the huge numbers of men who were returned from the war, either with severe injuries, both physical and mental, Field Marshal Haig set up a charity, which has become known as the Poppy Appeal. Each year poppies are sold and the proceeds go towards supporting veterans throughout the UK. Normally there's a big push in the lead up to the 11th of November, which is Remembrance Day. And finally, for some fantastic views out over to the west of the city, you can climb up onto the ramparts here and you get an opportunity to take some fantastic photos. However, I have to say that the best is yet to come, because once you get up onto the upper ward at the top of the castle, the views are sensational out over towards the northern half of the city. As I walk up Hawk Hill, here on the right we have the Governor's residence. Now, this was originally built in 1742 for the castle governor. It was eventually suspended in 1876. Again, like other buildings, it's been used for other purposes since then. However, presently it's used as an officer's mess and as a residence for the honorary governor. Now, the honorary governor is normally appointed when special events take place in Edinburgh. The Edinburgh military tattoo is an example of such an occasion. The building beyond the governor's residence was originally built in 1799 as barracks to accommodate the infantry battalion of 600 officers and men. The building was not considered by the great and the good of Edinburgh to be a building befitting of such a prestigious castle, such as Edinburgh Castle, but it served its purpose. Now it serves two purposes. Part of it is used as an administrative block for the army in Scotland. The other part is the regimental museum for one of the local Scottish regiments, the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. And the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards were formed from an amalgamation of two other cavalry regiments, the 3rd Carabiniers and the Royal Scots Greys. They can be traced back as far as 1678, and really their record in conflicts and battle over the centuries is second to none. Unfortunately, the museum is closed at the moment, but when it does reopen, it is well worth a visit. Directly opposite, there is another museum. This time it's dedicated to the Royal Scots, and the Royal Scots are the oldest infantry regiment in the British Army, and they were founded in 1633. Again, this museum is closed, but well worth a visit when and if you do get the opportunity. Further round from the two museums, we come to the prison that was used for the prisoners of war. Yet again, these vaults that are located under the Great Hall in the Queen Anne building have been used for a host of other purposes, including food and military supplies, barracks, kitchens and so on, but they are mainly known for being used as a prison. Ever since 1758, when it first started being permanently used as a prison, it had prisoners from the 7-Year War with France, and it held as many as 500 prisoners. It also held prisoners of high value who were captured during the American Wars of Independence, and then latterly yet more French prisoners from during the Napoleonic Wars. As you walk through the prison, this will take you up to Crown Square, which is at the very top of the castle. Finally, we get to the cherry on the cake, the Crown Square. This is effectively the high point of the castle. What used to be known as the Palace Yard eventually evolved thanks to the vision of successive kings to what we see today. It was in the later 1400s that James III started to plan an arrangement of buildings he considered to be more suited to a king's accommodation. Where the Great Hall is now was previously a sheer rock face, so he started by building up and outward, creating a platform. He did this by building vaults underneath. They became the prison. It then allowed him to build the Great Hall that you see before us. He didn't live long enough to complete his vision, so it was left to his son James IV, and eventually the Great Hall was completed in 1512, only a year before he would be killed at the Battle of Flodden. However, it was used for banquets, state occasions and the meeting of the Scottish Parliament. In fact, Mary Queen of Scots, on her return from France in 1561, held a banquet here before proceeding down the Royal Mile to the palace. In 1650, Oliver Cromwell captured the castle and he converted it into barracks, and it remained that way for the next couple of centuries. Then in 1799 it became a military hospital, and the beautiful hammer beam roof that you see here was covered up with a ceiling. Then in 1886, work began to restore the Great Hall to its former glory under the supervision of architect Hippolyte Blanc. It was at this point that the hammer beam roof was brought back out into the open. The restoration was supposed to bring the remainder of the Great Hall back up to something approaching a medieval Great Hall, but in reality it was more of a Victorian vision of what it should look like. I'll leave it up to the viewer to make up their own mind on what they think. From the Great Hall, if we work our way round in a clockwise direction, we come to the Queen Anne building. This was previously a gun house, it's now a tea room. Then on the north side of the square we come to the Scottish National War Memorial. Previously this was St Mary's Chapel, which was then converted into yet more barrack accommodation for the troops. However, after the First World War, this new building was built as a memorial to all of the Scottish servicemen who died in the First World War. Finally, the royal palace apartments are located here on the eastern side of the square. The highlight of the visit to the palace apartments are to the vault, where the honours of Scotland are held. These could otherwise be described as the crown jewels of Scotland, consisting of a crown, considered to be the oldest in Britain, the sceptre and the sword of state. There are other pieces of royal jewellery in the vault that can be viewed as well. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to do any filming in the vault, neither are we able to do any filming inside the National War Memorial, hence the reason why there's no footage of both of these areas. When you visit, it's best to do the National War Memorial first and then work round anti-clockwise by going to the Great Hall. That should be your second place to visit, and then finally the vaults to see the crown jewels. That way you won't miss anything. Edinburgh Castle offers the facility for those with mobility issues or disabled with this shuttle vehicle. There's two of them that can bring you up from the entrance of the castle up to the top with no problem whatsoever. You just need to let them know in advance. Here we have the dog cemetery that's over on the north side of the castle, and this allows you great views out along the southern shore of the Firth of Forth over to the Kingdom of Fife, and down below you've got the new town. This is St Margaret's Chapel, and it's claimed to be the oldest building, not just in the castle but in the whole of Edinburgh. It was built in around 1130 by the then King David I. He was the youngest son of Queen Margaret, who in turn was wife to King Malcolm III. David, like his mother, was a very devout Catholic. He was instrumental in bringing various religious orders to Scotland to build abbeys to further the Catholic faith. Despite Robert the Bruce destroying most of the castle during the Scottish Wars of Independence, this was the only building not to be destroyed. Again, like many others, it's been used for other purposes, and at one time was even a gunpowder store. The chapel is very small, but is well worth a visit, and this is a stained glass window of Queen Margaret as Saint Margaret once she had been canonised. Opposite is the largest gun in the castle, Mons Meg, weighs 6 tons and can be traced back to 1457. To exit the castle, you simply follow the signs and you take the Lang stairs down to the lower ward. You'll pass the Argyle Tower that you see here on the right hand side. In total there are 70 steps, so if you think that's not going to be manageable, again you need to contact one of the members of staff and they will arrange for the shuttle vehicle to take you back down to the bottom of the castle entrance. Right then folks, that concludes the tour of Edinburgh Castle. I hope it's given you a little bit more guidance and information on what to expect under the current restrictions due to COVID, with social distancing, the route round the castle, and giving you a little bit of history about the place as well. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and share it, and subscribe to the channel, and obviously keep an eye out for any other new videos that I bring out in the future. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.